Okay, so you want to own a sugar mill. Buy some land near the cane fields, put up a factory, crush the stalks, bag the sugar, sell it to the world. Sugar is everywhere. Everyone eats it. It sounds like the safest business on the planet. Here's the problem. Before you crush a single stalk of cane, you need somewhere between $150 million and $500 million just to build the factory, not to run it, just to build it. And even after you spend that money, most sugar mills only manage to keep single-digit profit margins, which means a small mistake, a bad season, a weak harvest can wipe out an entire year of work. In countries like Brazil, India, and Thailand, where most of the world's sugar actually comes from, a single harvest can decide whether a mill survives the next 10 years or not. And here's the part that makes this business genuinely strange. A normal factory, if demand is weak, can just slow down. Wait a few months. Build up less inventory. A sugar mill cannot do that. Once the cane is cut, a clock starts ticking, and that clock cannot be paused. The sugar inside the plant starts breaking down within 24 to 48 hours of being harvested. So the mill has no choice. It has to run constantly at full speed the moment the cane starts coming in, whether the market wants sugar that week or not. So here's the real question. If sugar is something billions of people eat every single day, why is owning the machine that makes it one of the riskiest bets in all of agriculture? And here's the twist that surprises almost everyone who looks closely at this industry. The mills that actually make consistent money are often making very little of that money from sugar itself. So if sugar isn't where the profit comes from, where does the money actually come from? Picture 1 ton of sugarcane arriving at the factory gate. Most people imagine that ton turning into sugar, full stop. In reality, that 1 ton of cane splits into 5 completely different products, and sugar is often the cheapest one of the 5. Out of that 1 ton, you get around 100 to 130 kilograms of raw sugar. That's the part everyone thinks about. But you also get somewhere between 275 and 300 kilograms of a dry, fibrous leftover called bagasse. You get 30 to 60 kilograms of a thick, dark syrup called molasses. You get another 30 to 40 kilograms of a sludge called filter cake. And you get a liquid byproduct called vinasse. For most of the history of this industry, bagasse and molasses were treated as garbage, something to burn or dump. Today, they are often worth more than the sugar itself. Bagasse, that dry fiber left over after the juice is squeezed out, can be burned in high-pressure boilers to spin turbines and generate electricity. Not just enough electricity to run the factory. Extra electricity. Electricity that gets sold straight back to the national power grid. In Brazil and India, this matters even more than it sounds, because the sugar harvest happens during the dry season, exactly when hydroelectric dams are running low on water, and the grid is desperate for extra power. So the mill isn't just selling electricity. It's selling electricity at the exact moment the country needs it most. Then there's molasses. You can sell it cheap, as cattle feed, or you can run it through a distillery next door and turn it into ethanol, either to blend into gasoline or to burn directly in flex fuel cars. And ethanol, depending on the month, can be worth significantly more than the sugar you gave up making. This is where the real strategy of a modern mill begins. The smartest operators stop asking, how much sugar can I make from this cane? They start asking, how much total revenue can I squeeze out of this cane, no matter which product it ends up as? A mill that only makes sugar is playing with 1 card. A mill that makes sugar, ethanol, and electricity is playing with 3. And when one of those 3 prices falls, the other 2 can carry the business. So if literally every part of the plant has value, why do so many of these companies still go broke? Here's the part nobody warns you about walking in. Most sugar mills only operate for somewhere between 100 and 180 days a year. That's it. For the other half of the year, sometimes closer to 2/3 of the year, the machinery just sits there. But the loans don't stop. The depreciation on a $500 million factory doesn't pause for the off-season. The salaries of your trained factory staff don't stop. The interest payments to your bank keep accruing every single day, all 365 of them, whether the mill is crushing cane or not. So you have this brutal mismatch. All your bills run on a full year clock. All your income has to be earned inside a window of less than half a year, and inside that window, every single hour matters in a way that's hard to picture unless you understand what's happening to the cane. The moment cane is cut, sugar starts leaking out of it, biologically, chemically, whether you like it or not. Within the first day, you might lose 1 or 2% of the sugar. By 3 days, you could be looking at a loss of 5 to 10%. By 5 days, losses can climb past 20%, and the cane starts causing serious processing problems in the factory itself. So, imagine it rains for a week during harvest season. Heavy machinery can't go into muddy fields without wrecking next year's crop. Harvesting stops. But the mill keeps paying its workers, keeps paying interest to the bank, and the cane that was already cut before the rain started just sits there, rotting, losing value by the hour. When the rain finally stops, the mill has to process cane that's already partly ruined, and there's no way to get that lost sugar back. It's gone. Forever. You can't run overtime shifts in December to make up for a rainy week in July. The season is closed permanently the moment it ends. And once the season does end, the mill doesn't just get a break either. The machinery that just spent months crushing acidic, abrasive cane juice needs serious repair. Rollers need to be reground. Boiler tubes need descaling. Centrifuges need rebuilding. All of that costs real money, and none of it produces a single dollar of revenue. So what single decision determines whether those few months of crushing become a wildly profitable season, or a financial disaster that takes years to recover from? Here's something almost nobody outside the industry realizes. Mills often have to agree on what they'll pay farmers for cane months before they have any real idea what the sugar market will look like when that cane is finally processed and sold. The most sophisticated mills, especially in Brazil, deal with this by staying flexible right up until the very last moment. Because the same ton of cane juice can become either sugar or ethanol, factory managers are constantly running the numbers, sometimes changing their mix week to week, sometimes almost daily. If sugar prices on the international market are strong, they push more juice toward the sugar house. If the domestic fuel market is hot or global sugar prices are weak, they shift more of that same juice into the fermentation tanks to make ethanol instead. This flexibility is powerful, but it doesn't remove the risk. It just changes its shape. Sugar is traded globally as a commodity, the same way oil or wheat is on exchanges like the Intercontinental Exchange, under what's known as the Sugar Number 11 contract. Because prices swing so much, mills often lock in prices 12 to 18 months ahead of time, before the cane is even planted for that season, through what's called hedging. Sounds smart. Lock in your price, remove the uncertainty, sleep well at night. Well, almost. Here's the catch. Say a mill locks in 70% of its expected crop at 18 cents a pound. Then a drought somewhere else in the world sends prices soaring to 26 cents a pound. The mill doesn't just miss out on the upside. Because these contracts are settled daily against the current market price, the mill now has to send cash, real cash, to the exchange every single day to cover the gap between what it locked in and what the market is now worth. That's called a margin call, and it can happen fast enough to drain a company's bank account in weeks, even though the actual crop sitting in the ground is, on paper, worth more money than ever. And there's a second trap hiding underneath the first one. If a mill guesses wrong about how much cane it will actually harvest, and it locked in prices for more sugar than it ends up producing, it has to go buy back those contracts at whatever the market is charging that day, which can turn a safety net into a straight-up trading loss worth tens of millions of dollars. So what happens when it isn't just one mill that guesses wrong, but an entire country? Because sugarcane employs tens of millions of farmers and rural workers, in India alone the number is somewhere above 50 million people, governments almost never leave this industry alone. And what a government decides can matter more to a mill's survival than anything happening on the factory floor. Take Brazil and India, the two biggest producers on the planet, and you'll see two completely different philosophies. In Brazil, the price paid for cane is largely set by a market-linked formula, updated monthly, based on what sugar and ethanol are actually selling for. The government's biggest lever is the mandatory blend of ethanol and gasoline, currently somewhere between 27 and 32%. When the government raises that blend requirement, it instantly creates enormous new demand for ethanol, which pulls cane away from sugar production and tightens global sugar supply. It's basically a demand floor the government can turn up or down with a policy announcement. India works almost the opposite way. The central government sets a mandatory minimum price mills must pay farmers for their cane, called the fair and remunerative price. On top of that, individual states, especially politically powerful ones, often set their own even higher price, called the state-advised price, to keep rural voters happy. Here's why that becomes dangerous. When global sugar prices crash, that mandatory price to farmers doesn't move. The mill is still legally required to pay it, in full, regardless of whether it can sell its sugar for a profit or not. The government does set a minimum selling price for sugar to try to protect the mills, but for years that price stayed frozen well below what it actually cost to produce the sugar in the first place. The result is a slow-motion financial crisis. Mills fall behind on paying farmers. Across the country, unpaid dues to farmers regularly climb past $1.5 to $2 billion, triggering protests, lawsuits, and emergency government bailouts. So if one government decision, one blend mandate, one price freeze, can shift the entire industry's fate overnight, who actually ends up absorbing all that risk? Here's where this business gets genuinely brutal for whoever owns the mill. Roughly 70 to 80% of a mill's entire operating budget goes to just one thing, buying the raw cane from farmers. And farmers, in most regions, have to be paid within about 14 days of delivering their cane by law. Miss that window, and the government can seize your sugar stockpile or pull your operating license entirely. Right behind the farmers stand the banks. Because building a mill takes hundreds of millions of dollars, most mills are carrying serious debt, and that debt is usually secured against the mill's own machinery and its sugar inventory sitting in the warehouse. Banks often set up automatic arrangements so loan payments get pulled straight out of incoming revenue before the mill ever touches that cash. Then come the workers, the truck drivers, the harvesting contractors, the chemical suppliers. If a transport contractor doesn't get paid, trucks stop moving cane and the entire factory grinds to a halt within hours. So who's left standing at the very back of the line waiting to see if there's anything left over? The owners. The shareholders. The people who actually put up the money to build the thing in the first place. That means in a bad year, the mill can still be paying farmers in full, still be paying the bank in full, still be paying every worker and contractor in full, while the owner's own capital is quietly being wiped out underneath them. The owner can't ask farmers to take less, can't ask the bank to wait. They absorb 100% of the bad news alone. So if everyone else in this chain gets paid first, where on earth can an owner actually find an edge? Here's where the smartest operators actually make their money, and it has almost nothing to do with luck. In a large mill crushing around 10,000 tons of cane a day, improving the amount of sugar you actually recover from that cane by just 0.5% can add somewhere between $2 and $4 million in pure profit over a single season. 0.5%. That's it. Most of this battle happens in how the juice gets extracted from the stalk in the first place. The traditional method uses heavy rollers to physically crush the cane, squeezing the juice out, but this eats up a huge amount of the factory's own power, sometimes 40% of it. A newer method, called diffusion, works more like brewing tea, soaking the crushed cane in hot water, and letting the sugar leach out naturally. It extracts more sugar, close to 99% compared to around 97 to 98% with rollers, and it uses far less mechanical power, but it's not free. Diffusion needs more water, which means more diluted juice, which means the evaporators have to burn more steam boiling that extra water back off. And every bit of steam spent on evaporation is steam that can't be sent through a turbine to make electricity to sell. So even here, in what sounds like a pure engineering decision, you're really deciding how to split value between sugar, water removal, and electricity sales. The best mills obsess over this balance. They squeeze steam consumption down as far as physically possible, freeing up more bagasse to burn for high-margin electricity instead. They put vibration sensors on their machines and thermal cameras on their turbines, catching a failing bearing weeks before it actually breaks down and costs them a week of the season. In this world, an experienced plant manager who deeply understands how to balance every one of these trade-offs in real time is often worth more to a company than an expensive new piece of machinery. But even the very best run mill on earth, with the sharpest managers and the newest sensors, can be destroyed by something that has nothing to do with engineering at all. Sugarcane isn't a crop you plant and harvest in one season. It takes 12 to 18 months in the ground to mature, which means it sits exposed to every single season of weather along the way, not just one. In the middle of 2021, the center-south region of Brazil, which alone produces around 40% of the entire world's sugarcane, got hit with something it hadn't seen in decades. 3 separate waves of freezing polar air swept across the region in June and July, dropping temperatures below freezing across millions of hectares of mature cane. When cane freezes, the water sitting inside its cells expands and physically ruptures the plant tissue. Once the weather warms back up, bacteria pour into those ruptured cells, and the cane starts fermenting and souring while it's still standing in the field. Mills had no choice but to rush the harvest, cutting cane that wasn't even fully mature yet, just to save whatever sugar they could before it rotted away completely. The damage showed up in the numbers almost immediately. According to industry tracking, the total cane harvest in that region for the following season fell by 14%, dropping from around 605 million tons down to about 523 million tons. Here's why that number matters so much to a mill's bottom line specifically. These factories are built and financed assuming they'll run at full throughput. When the crop shrinks by 14%, the mill simply runs out of cane weeks before the season was supposed to end. The boilers go cold early, the machinery sits idle, but the loan payments and the fixed overhead keep running on the same schedule they always do. And insurance barely helps here. A farmer can insure a standing crop, But a mill can't really ensure its own lost industrial capacity. The fact that a $500 million factory sat there doing nothing for 6 extra weeks.